India. The remarkable achievement of the ancient India in the fields of mathematics, astronomy, medicine and philosophy had earned her a lasting fame, but the historians are agreed that the era of her social, moral and religious degradation commenced from the opening decades of the 6th century. For shameless and revolting acts of sexual wantonness were consecrated by religion, even the temples had degenerated into cesspools of corruption. Women had lost their honor and respect in the society, and so had the values attached to chastity. It was not unusual that the husband losing in a game of chance dealt out even his wife. The honor of the family, especially in higher classes claiming a noble descent, demanded that the widow should burn herself alive with the funeral pyre of her dead husband. The custom, upheld by society as the supreme act of fealty on the part of a widow to her late husband, was so deep-rooted that it could be completely suppressed only after the establishment of the British rule in India. India left behind her neighbors, or rather every other country of the world, in evolving an inflexible and callously inhuman stratification of its society based on social inequality. This system, which excluded the original inhabitants of the country as exteriors or outcasts, was formulated to ensure the superiority of conquering Aryans and was invested with an aura of divine origin by the Brahmins. It canalized every aspect of the people's daily life according to heredity and occupation of different classes and was backed by religious and social laws set forth by the religious teachers and legislators. Its comprehensive code of life was applicable to the entire society, dividing it into 4 distinct classes. The Brahmins or priests enjoying the monopoly of performing religious rites. 2. The Kshatriyas of nobles and warriors supposed to govern the country, and 3. The Vaishyas or merchants, peasants and artisans. 4. The Sudras or the non-Aryan serfs meant to serve the first 3 castes. The Sudras or the Dasas, meaning slaves, forming a majority in the population, believed to have been born from the feet of Brahma, formed the most degraded class which had sunk socially to the lowest level. Nothing was more honorable for a Sudra, according to the Manu Shastra, than to serve the Brahmins and other higher castes. The social laws accorded the Brahmin class distinctive privileges and an honored place in society. A Brahmin who remembers the Rig Veda, says the Manu Shastra, is absolutely sinless, even if he debases all the 3 worlds. Neither any tax could be imposed on a Brahmin, nor he could be executed for any crime. The Sudras, on the contrary, could never acquire any property, nor retain any assets. Not allowed to sit near a Brahmin or touch him, the Sudras were not permitted to read the sacred scriptures. India was drying up and losing her vitality. Divided into numerous petty states, struggling for supremacy amongst them, the whole country had been given to lawlessness, maladministration and tyranny. The country had, furthermore, severed itself from the rest of the world and retired into her shell. Her fixed beliefs and the growing rigidity of her iniquitous social structure, norms, rites and customs had made her mind rigid and static. Its parochial outlook and prejudices of blood, race and color carried within it the seeds of destruction. Vidyadhar Mahajan, formerly professor of history in the Punjab University College, writes about the state of affairs in India on the eve of Muslim conquest. The people of India were living in isolation from the rest of the world. They were so much contented with themselves that they did not bother about what was happening outside their frontiers. Their ignorance of the developments outside their country put them in a very weak position. It also created a sense of stagnation among them. There was decay on all sides. There was not much life in the literature of the period. Architecture, painting and fine arts were also adversely affected. Indian society had become static and caste system had become very rigid. There was no remarriage of widows and restrictions with regard to food and drink became very rigid. The untouchables were forced to live outside the towns. Arabia. The idea of virtue, of morals, was unknown to the ancient Bedouin. Extremely fond of wine and gambling, he was hard-hearted enough to bury alive his own daughter. Pillage of caravans and cold-blooded murder for paltry gains were the typical methods to still the demands of the nomad. The Bedouin maiden enjoyed no social status, could be bartered away like other exchangeable goods or cattle or be inherited by the deceased's heir. There were certain foods reserved for men which could not be taken by women. A man could have as many wives as he liked and could dispose of his children if he had not enough means to provide for their sustenance. The Bedouin was bound by unbreakable bonds of fidelity to his family, blood relations, and, finally, to the tribe. Fights and forays were his sport and murder a trifling affair. A minor incident sometimes gave rise to a sanguine and long-drawn warfare between two powerful tribes. Oftentimes these wars were prolonged to as many as 40 years, in which thousands of tribesmen came to a violent end. Europe. At the beginning of the Middle Ages the torch of knowledge flickered dimly and all the literary and artistic achievements of the classical past seemed destined to be lost forever under the young and vigorous Germanic races which had risen to political power in the northern and western parts of Europe. The new rulers found neither pleasure nor honor in the philosophy, literature, and arts of the nations outside their frontiers and appeared to be as filthy as their minds were filled with superstition. Their monks and clergymen, passing their lives in a long routine of useless and atrocious self-torture, and wailing before the ghastly phantoms of their delirious brains, were abhorrent to the company of human beings. They still debated the point whether a woman had the soul of a human being or of a beast, or was she blessed with a finite or infinite spirit. She could neither acquire nor inherit any property nor had the right to sell or transfer the same. Robert Briffault writes in The Making of Humanity. From the 5th to the 10th century Europe lay sunk in a night of barbarism which grew darker and darker. It was a barbarism far more awful and horrible than that of the primitive savage, for it was the decomposing body of what had once been a great civilization. The features and impress of that civilization were all but completely effaced. Where its development had been fullest, e.g. in Italy and Gaul, all was ruin, squalor and dissolution.